Hello, welcome to the Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob, and it's time for the Hunker in the Bunker Day 8. Oh, easy. Not even difficult. Can't wait for Day 80. And I'm joined today on the line by a man who should need no introduction because he's part of an entire multiverse on his own. But I'm going to do it anyway. Mr. Sam Morgan. Hello, sir.
Hello, Rob. Thank you for having me.
Ah, listen, it's a total pleasure. I'm a big fan of yours. Big fan. Always have been, always will be. So it's super lucky to get you on the show. If you don't know, Sam's based over in Australia. Where are you based, Sam, actually?
I'm down in Melbourne, so I'm with Nick Owen and Lockie Mulcakey and Danny Carroll and all those boys are all sort of about 10 minutes from each other.
Yes, and if you don't know Sam, he's from a podcast called The Dwellers Below, which is an awesome podcast, and everyone on it is exceptional. Specifically, your newest member, Randy, big fan of him. But yeah, all brilliant. And I miss Gentili. Where's Gentili? That's the question. Does it wind you up when people ask
Gen
that?
Gentili is playing quite a bit of Star Wars Legion,
Ooh.
and he's one of those people that responds. You know the awful threads on Facebook? He's one of the guys that consistently throws comments on those. So that's where you'll mainly see him rearing his head. Um,
Is it for fun? Does he genuinely have an opinion, or he just likes to stir the pot?
No, I think he is strongly opinionated and he's got some interesting hot takes. I don't think he's doing it ironically. I think he's doing it seriously.
Oh, well, that's fab. That's fab. Well,
Hmm.
I'm very much looking forward to talking to you today. The subject of today's show is going to be mixed allegiance armies, which I somehow think you've made your own. Which is
Hmm.
mixed order, mixed chaos, which is going to be really fun. We're going to talk about those and just get to know you a little bit more as well, if you don't mind. I was going to say hello to everyone in the chat. Wargaming Dad, Daz Brain over on Facebook, Dexamon, MJ Pegasus, Jimmy 10A, I see you, Mr. Teej, Dreadwoods. I hope you're all well, staying safe. And if you're listening to the podcast, make sure you're staying hydrated and washing those hands and keeping some adequate social distance. And then, just thank you to everyone, especially everyone on the Most Gamer Patreon. Thanks for supporting me. Thanks for supporting the show and everything that we're doing. It means loads and loads to me. So thank you tons. And if you are watching live, maybe you can like or subscribe or fuck knows at this stage, like because we're on so many platforms. Maybe send me a tweet. Yeah, that's the thing. That'll do. There we go. That's all the public service announcement over. I was thinking of Sam. I got a question for you because I actually really rate you
Hmm.
in just all things. Do you reckon I should just pre-record that at the start of the show just to get it out of the way? Musical intro.
Absolutely. I think maybe even bring in the big guns. Get Nathan to pre-record it.
Wow.
I'm sure he'd be really good at delivering lines. I reckon that'd be right up his alley.
That would be absolutely perfect. Did you hear his description yesterday? Rob Kelly, thanks for subscribing. Did you hear his description last night of what Tabletop Simulator was?
Now, would it offend you if I said no?
No, he doesn't. No.
Not yet.
Every time
No,
I'm
I'm
like,
still
Nathan, did you
behind.
listen to the podcast? He's like, no.
I had a choice today. I had about an hour during the day where I could listen, and I had to choose between Benjamin and Nathan. So that was a tough call, but I went with the Bone Splitters tech and the Nighthaunt tech instead.
Yeah, well, I don't blame you. Me and Nathan's show last night was just us being mental with each other. Thank you to everyone who's just subscribed, and also one of the we talked about doing this show for a while,
Mhm.
way back when I was in Australia, maybe even before. And but one of your biggest fans, I actually don't. Do you know who your biggest fan on the internet is?
Jacob Berry.
Is actually Adam Boutros Ghali,
Oh yeah, okay.
a former CanCon winner
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
one of the show hosts of the Heralds of War.
Adam is someone that I've known for 20 years, so I'm pleased that he likes me. That's good. So, just a very brief history there. Like when I was a 12-year-old, Lord of the Rings came out, and I went into my local GW, and Adam was probably like the 16 or 17-year-old casual working in the store. And for that whole Christmas holidays, I sort of hero worshipped him. So there you go.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he'll do the demo games and teach you how to paint and all that sort of stuff. So it's a long and storied history where we basically only saw each other every 10 years until I got into AOS, and then I've seen him subsequently a lot more. It's a great bloke.
He's hilarious as well, like genuinely funny.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
which he hides quite well. To the Heralds of War as well on Twitch. Virulent Merchant Prince, thanks for joining us. So before we get into talking about mixed allegiance armies, which I know you're a huge fan of,
Hmm.
and also thank you to everyone who I just saw subscribe, like Studio Urswood, Jonathan Etland, some big names in the house.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, right. And I hope you're all keeping well and staying safe. Sam, just a little bit about you.
Hmm.
Can I get your journey through just wargaming, how you set up, how you started out?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's probably like the summer of 1999, and I had a family party.
You were listening
Um,
to some 41.
yeah, that's right. I think we're into Lincoln Park big back then. It was really weird. It was like the what is it? Ice Sugar Magic, whatever that Red Hot Chili Peppers album is.
Yeah.
We're massively into that, but equally we're into like this Linkin Park sort of stuff. So I don't know. They're like incongruent music styles, but it doesn't matter. And the brand new edition of 40K had come out, and what that meant is second edition, which was the one with the Space Marine with the big power fist on the front cover, was selling like cheap as chips at the local toy store. So
Mhm.
one of my mates got that, and we just like looked at the cards and looked at the pictures and the monopose Gretchens. And back then, you used to get a cardboard cutout for your big unit. So the killer can was literally just a picture of a killer can that you're supposed to use in game. Um, and yeah, that was my first sort of introduction to the hobby. But then I didn't end up playing for ages and ages and ages after that. But at the back of my mind, I was always like conscious that there was this world that existed with people rolling dice and pushing toy soldiers around. So I reckon I probably got into it properly during eighth edition. So when I finally sort of had money and I was an adult, and I went down, there was a club. There's a club in Melbourne called Hampton Games Club, and at the time it was like famous. Maybe it's like South London Legion now, or maybe it's like Mango Mafia or something like that, where there's a club of really good players constantly playing, and all like obsessed with winning. And when I went there, Chris Cousins, so Ed Cousins was there, Nick Owen was there, a heap of old Hammer fantasy guys were there. And yeah, like every Saturday we were just flat out like playing like the Just Play guys over there,
Yeah.
how they like train in inverted commas, and it sounds like a massive wank, and it's like trying to find like on the margins like those tiny little advantages that you can. That's what we were all like, and there was a big group of us, and we all had the same goal, which was go away and win tournaments and Hampton represent. And that was just awesome. And it was like, it was my whole life. And then eighth died, and I sort of just had this gaping hole, um, this gaping hole, because no one went on to play at AOS here. And it probably wasn't for a couple of years until the KO book dropped. And I was drawn back to the aesthetic then rather than the actual, the rules or whatever. And I got back to AOS, and then I progressively just hounded all my old mates, and I've managed to get them to migrate over as well, which has been great because since we've joined the community, it's like a completely new group of people. So we've made a heap of new friends out of it, which has been awesome.
Yes, it's a pretty positive and solid community, right? Like really upbeat.
Oh man, it's fucking the best. Yeah, we can swear on this, right?
Yeah, yeah, all day long.
Yeah, yeah, it's awesome. It's really really cool. And I guess for me, like I could have done a few flexes there. Do you mind if I go back
Go for it.
and
I
just
want
do
to
like
hear
a
it.
few nerd flexes, Rob?
Yeah.
So I won a fucking heap of tournaments. Went over to New Zealand twice. Won both their biggest tournaments. Won the biggest tournaments over here. Went to the ETC. Was like drawn. I played against the then English master. His name was Haristo.
I've
So he
heard
was
of
the
him. He now
master.
follows me on
We were
Twitter,
playing. Yeah,
which
we were
I see
playing
as
a
a
mirror
compliment.
match. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So I don't know if you're familiar with ETC, but typically the game sort of modality is who can draw the best. So if you have a team where everyone goes up 12-8 or 11-9, you've won the round and you've done the right thing. So in the mirror, you would expect like a 10-10. You'd expect it to be cagey and for there not to be an outcome. So he's the current UK master at the time, and I 20'd him in 2 turns, so that was good.
I like how
And yeah,
it
no,
wasn't
the
just you
ETs.
20'd him, like you bodied him in 2 turns, like a knockout round one. Yeah.
It was a big knockout. So that was really awesome, and I love the ETC. It like talking about nerd wank, like um, the people that go there. They sort of, there's this reverence about it, but only they have that reverence. So it's like this really old boys club event, but it's amazing. And if anyone has an opportunity to go, and I think they'll probably cancel this year, but if they get it going again next year, I'd absolutely recommend anyone that has the opportunity to jump at it. It's the best gaming experience I've ever had.
I think the only reason it seems so like opaque, effectively, is because no work has really ever been done to like showcase what it is, or some work has been done, but like it's not been done to acceptable degree. I'd argue, because I had a whole bunch of team events. I was very much looking forward to Six Nations. We were going to do the coverage at Six Nations this year, so hopefully when everything's back up and running, we're still going to be doing. I'm pretty certain we're all still booked to do it. But my goal, like, it was my benchmark moment for the year. I've got a lot of projects on the go, but that was my project. That was the one. That was like, this is going to be like. This is going to be showcasing team tournaments the way they should be done. Or the best version I can do round one. And so I'm a little bit good about that. So I would say some of that, has been.
You've got to remove the veil. Show everyone what's happening there.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Warhammer is the best, right? And Team Warhammer is the best Warhammer. So like, why wouldn't you showcase that? I think if we can get some good teams events happening, in Australia, I would absolutely privilege those in terms of the weekends that I'm able to free up and go away and hang out with my mates.
Same. Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more. I think that's a solid point. I was going to say hello to everyone in the chat. MJ Pegasus, K-Dread, Owen Jackson, how are you? Big love. Dude, our date is in day 2 of 84. Just realising that I might be doing a daily show for 84 days in a row is a bit... I've just seen the long future for me, and that's fun. Shadowhammer in the chat says team events are the best, and he fucking loves them. Big shout out to you, Shadowhammer. Hope you're well. So when you got into Age of Sigmar, like, I know, especially coming from other editions of a game, it's janky and it's a bit odd. Like, where did you, like, what initially, like, mechanics wise? Because I feel like you're a mechanics player, which is excellent.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is it like that attracted it to you? What was the first moment where it pinged with you and you got it and you're like, yeah, I'm into this?
So I was running Daughters of Cain. They just dropped when I'd sort of re-entered, and at the time everyone was running witches with 2 hand weapons, and they were running units of 30 witches with 2 hand weapons, and they were spamming buffs, and they were making blender units. And I started actually, like, I would say at the same time as, I think, I don't know who was the TM build, but at the same time as Benjamin over in New Zealand, actually at the time, was running Sisters of Slaughter. I started running them, and I was just smashing people with the 6-inch pile-in, and then baiting and using the command ability on the avatar to fight in the hero phase, which at the time was really novel because we hadn't had the activation wars yet. And for me, it was all about, like, working outside the parameters of the normal game structure. So typically it would just be like charge in, fight in sequence. Sequencing is really important, but I was doing this really janky stuff where my sisters were sitting outside of 6 and jumping in and fighting combats. I was activating in different phases. I was sort of doing stuff where if they fought back, then I had other models behind the sisters in the snakes that had the 2-inch range, that would then be able to fight and chuck mortals in and stuff. And it was just, I really liked that. And I also really liked that at the time, and I think maybe even still now, prayers were seemingly ridiculous because there was no way to stop them. So it's just like, I really like the Khorne book, and I really like the Daughters of Cain book because they both had access to these incredibly strong prayers that can't be nullified. So it was a toss-up between playing Khorne or Daughters, and I'm glad I chose the Daughters in the end.
It's a really good army as well because it has some very unique mechanics. Like, whenever, like, I really enjoyed having Daughters of Cain on the stream whenever we did coverage, because as soon as you saw Marathi in there, you're like, there we go. It's a really fun thread for a whole match that you can be talking through. Like, it's such a unique piece inside the game mechanically that I just find it like fascinating. I know when you face against that Daughters of Cain army, you're expecting all those rerolls both in saves and to hits and wounds. You're like, this is a terrifying prospect to face,
Yeah.
but also just that. I think that linchpin of Marathi and also the Kinrian Heartrenders, they've just got this lovely like triple threat kind of like mechanic. Like you're having to think about quite a few things playing against that army. It must be a really fun army to utilize some of those components, right?
Yeah, it was awesome. And at the time, I was running the Calebron Temple, which is the teleport at the start of the hero
Oh,
phase. So I was
nice.
doing stuff like teleport 10 Doomfire Warlocks and then just nuke their important support character. So it does like six mortals, which is really strong, six mortals at range, and then you have the flexibility of the whole board. And then you can stack the buffs on the warlocks and they're still really good in combat and they shoot and they do magic and they get bonuses to cast and unbind and all that stuff. And the other trick that I was doing at the time was I was using the teleporter character. I was a teleporter character at the start of the phase. And then there's a spell in the Daughter's book that allows you to swap the positions of characters. And after you swap, you can move. So what you would do is you would teleport a support hero like a hag or something, and then you would swap so that Marathi ends up where the hag was. So then Marathi would be 9 inches away from them and able to use a 14-inch move. And that was really cool as well and really difficult for people to mitigate at the time. Whereas now I think obviously there's lots of counters to Marathi in terms of endless spells and instant kills and whatever. But at the time, none of that stuff existed. So you could literally put her wherever you wanted. I think the coverage was like 80 inches on the board she could go. So that was awesome.
Yeah, really solid. Before we get on to talk about the main subject of the show, and some other little elements, Tanker1982 in the chat has got a question. He says, ask Morgan about the time we played cricket against each other, Dwellers versus the Heralds in a game of
Oh
park
fuck.
cricket.
No, it wasn't park cricket. This was great. This is really like I think we're playing Bert Shield, which incidentally is his surname. So yeah, we were playing down in Camberwell, which is a pretty prosperous suburb here in Melbourne, leafy green suburb, about 5 k's from the city. And I'm a left arm orthodox bowler, and I was tossing him up, getting above the eye line like you're supposed to. And the tanker took a liking to it. And it's fair to say there was a Mercedes dealership about, I don't know, 200 meters from the ground that wasn't safe while I was bowling to Adam. So that was probably a low light of my sporting career.
Did you take out? Did you take out a Mercedes?
Yes, he hit me so far, so far to the point that, like, yeah, I can still remember it. That was like 10 years ago.
All right, so
yeah,
go on.
I was not a good cricketer, and Adam was. I'm more than happy to put my hand up there.
I used to play cricket, which was really fun. I was one of those. I played cricket before puberty hit. I remember clear as day. Me and one of my really good friends
Yeah.
at school, Phil. He was a fast bowler. I was a wicket keeper, and batsman. That was me. And I would, when we were young enough, I would just stand right behind the wickets, right? Because the balls weren't coming that fast. There was no real drama.
Yeah.
And as we both bulked out, because both Phil and I ended up as big 6-footers, like the balls were coming faster and faster, right? But in my pride, I was like, well, and I ended up playing county for the cricket for the county, and me and Phil played on the same team. So in my pride, I just didn't go any further back at any point. I was like, I can still handle these. This is fine. I don't know how to do it any other way.
Love it.
And as time went on, I ended up getting my nose busted at least twice, with blood pouring all down my whites. And I was like, do you know what? Probably I'm going to take a few steps back now at this stage. I think at one point he genuinely took it as a target. He's like, I'm going to go right for Rob's face. But it wasn't ever that. It was just when he got edged, and it was just too quick. It was just too fast.
I can imagine you playing any sport, but cricket specifically, and there's 10 kids there in their whites, and you're wearing your Kurt Cobain top, and your torn jeans and your Doc Martens.
Good. No, I appreciate that. Thanks.
Yes.
I'm just the front cover of
It's a nice visual.
Yes, it's a really nice visual. Also, if you guys who are watching live want to join our Discord, some people in the chat have been. Tristan's been showing off his gorgeous Cities army, which is real nice. I actually really want to know how he did the enamel/cream on the shield. If he wants to let us know. And Steel Rat's just put up an incredible incredible looking Bone Splitters army, Drakfoot clan. That looks really, really nice. Elf Bro, thanks for subscribing, by the way. Big love to you. So, Smorgan, what's your favourite part of the hobby?
Oh, that's a great question. My favorite part of the hobby, I would say, is thinking about Age of Sigma. So, like, there's this guy over here, James Morehouse. He's like a gun at all games, and he talks about like the hobby dojo, and that's when you're sitting at your desk and you're just at the back of your mind thinking about combos, or you're thinking about counters, or you're thinking about tricks that you might be able to execute. I think like probably list writing on Excel spreadsheets and making those spreadsheets look like their work is probably my favorite thing to do. And I love one of the things I really like doing is it's like called double diamond design. It's where you do divergent and then convergent thinking. So the divergent element is like throwing everything out there on the table and having a sense of like what's every single war scroll that this army is able to access. And like good examples of this would be Cities of Sigma and War Clans, and then being a bit more divergent because you go, all right, you've thrown it all out there, you've looked at the theme, and maybe you're trying to find all the debuffs you can, and then you try and bring that into a 2,000 point match play army that does a particular thing. So for me, it's definitely like list ideation and having like 20 variances on a theme as you're trying to sort of figure out what you're going to play. So that can be really good. In terms of being able to engage with the hobby at a time like this, because I'm not really fussed if I'm not playing games because I'm still doing that same thinking about it.
Yeah, like especially for people like yourself who work super hard, or people around the world who've got a lot of commitments, family or whatnot. Gaming was often seen as a luxury anyway. Being able to get down and game and talk about it. So a lot of it was done in talking or theory or practice at home, whatever that might be. I know some people think that's a bit sad, but I think that's completely viable, right?
No, like get your toys out, deploy them, see what they look like. I remember like a different game, but in 8 I used to have a think about like because the deployment was pretty much standard what the army would look like, and I wouldn't even know what my opponent had. I didn't know roughly where all my stuff wanted to go. And I know sometimes when I watch people deploy in AOS, it's like, oh, this is premeditated. This person's actually already, this is their standard deployment against an alpha, or this is their standard deployment for like a refused flank, for instance, where they'll stick everything really heavily to one side so that it's quite difficult to crack what the sort of describe as the castle.
Yeah, I sometimes sometimes at deployment, I reckon some people should at least film me during deployment because it's an entire cagey fight.
What the fuck?
It's a cagey fight with the person who I think I'm playing in my head. Yeah, like
Yeah,
so I'm
sure.
playing myself because you don't know what they're doing, right? They're deploying stuff and you can make
Yeah.
some sort of assumptions. But yeah, often I'm like, yeah, he's probably put that down for this, so I'm gonna, and then I'll always, and I'm terrible for this, and I tell myself off loads. I go for a wild card drop. I'm like, I'm going to put that there,
Yeah.
see what he does. Yeah. And then afterwards I go, that was stupid. That was stupid. I shouldn't have done that. Switches.
My favorite is when you're playing someone and they just mimic you. So you're like, I'm going to put my horses down. Then they put their horses down. I'm going to put my monster down. They put their monster down. It's just like, okay, I see what's happening here.
Dave Fraser says, I have a standard deployment of getting my models to fit on a board in a pretty way, which I think is fair. Delirium Noctum has just said in the chat, yeah, my wife and I built a Warhammer table out of Amazon boxes and a 2,000 point game of Sylvaneth versus KO. The hobby will find a way. That's really nice. That's really nice that your wife will play Warhammer with you.
I was saying to you just off air before, Rob, I'm moving out to my parents shortly. It's just going to be takes a village to raise a child sort of situation. And my sister lives there, and her partner is like some ambiguous, I don't know, like maybe he's 30, maybe he's 55. I can't really work it out. He's some ambiguous age white nerd. So he plays quite a lot of Red Dead whenever I'm over there. So I'm contemplating, because once we go, we're going to be locked down. I'm contemplating taking 2 Age of Sigma armies and trying to like train him up so that I have an opponent while I'm there.
Yeah,
we'll see. We'll see how that plays out.
That's definitely good. But imagine you trained him so well. Like he after 6 months he emerges and he's just like at tournaments and he's just like bam, bam.
He only knows one build though. He's only ever played against one build.
But he's played it like fire. Like he knows every element he can get out of that list.
We'll wait and see.
Right, yeah. So with this, with your hobby being list building and getting into lists, one of the things
Hmm.
that strikes me is your love of Grand Alliance armies. So,
Hmm.
if you guys are listening and are new to Age of Sigmar or generally new to Wargaming, in Age of Sigmar, you have an allegiance. So, your army has to have all of a keyword pretty much. And then, if the more kind of structured your allegiance is, so for instance, if you take Grand Alliance Order, everything has to have the Order keyword. But then, if you play Sylvaneth, everything has to have the Sylvaneth keyword, and you're allowed a certain allotment of allies depending on what the Sylvaneth can take as allies. And then for that, you get bonuses. I personally think it's an incredibly beautiful way of giving power to narrative armies. Like every army's narrative, right? Like, which is,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
do you?
It's elegant, you know. It's a really cool design feature that this isn't something that Games Workshop have previously had in any of their systems that I'm aware of. And it's sort of, you know, you can look at it two ways. You can say that it's a really nice and elegant design feature, or you can say that it's soup and, you know, that it's an eyesore on the table and blah, blah, blah. So we're approaching it from it's an elegant design feature perspective in this show, I hope.
Yeah, I think that's the case. However, like there's been seen to be more power if you take something like a Sylvaneth or a pure Sylvaneth army, pure KO army, pure Daughters of Cain army. Like so, with the ally section of being 25% of your army. So in a normal match of 2,000 points, it's about 400 points, and it has to be one in every 4 units in your army. It's seen to be that's a more powerful build. But in classic Smorgon style, you fly in the face of that. Is that correct?
That is correct. Okay, can I tell you a quick Sylvaneth story?
Please.
So Sylvaneth is sort of renowned for being pretty underpowered at the moment,
Mm.
and recently I was at like a gaming day and I played against this Sylvaneth player. And before the game, we were talking, and he portrayed himself a particular way that made me think that he'd never won a game of Age of Sigma. And he had a really shit list, and I had a very, very strong cities list. And we're playing in a scenario which was incredibly favorable for me. And as we started deploying, he did the random like nothing was in buff range, whatever deployment. Um, and I was like, oh fuck, this poor bastard. He's never won. I couldn't care less whether I win or lose. I'm gonna like tutor him through this game. And anyway, he ends up beating me, kicking my ass, like smashing me. My mates come over halfway through the game and they're just like, what the fuck's going on? And then at the end of the game, I'm like, oh, congrats on your first win, man. It's like, oh no, I win all the time. I'm just like, oh my God. It's just like, he definitely like got the psychological win. He got the win on the table as well, but I was like, oh, what a bastard. So you got to watch out for those. You got to
Those
watch out for those
sharks.
Sylvaneth players
Yeah,
with
there's.
their psychological warfare.
It's a bit like
It's the only thing they
It's,
got going
it's
for
a bit
them.
like Iron Jaws players back in the day, where they were all just like, "Oh, I've got some Iron Jaws." You're like, "You're a nice fella. We'll have some fun."
Yeah.
But now it's the Sylvaneth
Oh,
players.
too fun.
That's great. Okay, so mixed Grand Alliance armies.
Hmm.
What are the principles like? What is it that attracts you to Grand Alliance armies?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So for me, what I like to do is like I get it. There's a lot of people out there that like playing with the Zench book, or they really like playing the big war or whatever, and they're cowards. That's fine. That's who they are as people. I like this idea of just finding combinations and then and bringing them together on the table and seeing if I can get it to work. So there's a couple of things. When I'm sort of evaluating the different units to work out how they're going to fit together and what the list is supposed to do. And some of it's about like what's the inherent strength on the war scroll. So if you think about war scrolls like Croak, or if you think about the Celestin Prime, the Knight of Xeros, for instance, they're all powerful on the basis of the abilities on their war scroll, and those abilities interacting either with other units within the army or working independently. So if you think about Croak, he's got board wide damage, he's got bonuses to cast Dispel and Unbind. He generates command points. There's a number of things that he does which are independent of the Seraphon book. And he, for me, would be, if I was writing order lists at the moment, he'll be the first thing I put in a list because he's always going to add value.
Hmm.
Then if you think about something like the Prime probably arguably is better outside of Stormcast. because he doesn't count against your number of units off the board or whatever. He can come down. He's got that mortal wounds area of effect that's going off. He's a bit of a glass cannon. You need to pick your fights carefully with him, but his ability to control dice rolls and that sort of stuff. And I think we saw with Simon at CanCon, shout out to Simon, he's a great guy. We saw it with Simon at CanCon in the cities where he's able to fight twice and stuff. Like there's a heap of things you can do with the Prime outside of the Stormcast. And then the Knight of Zeros is the one that I've run probably for the last 18 months. And the reason I run him is any unit within 10, you get reroll once to hit. So you need to be within 10 of the enemy unit, and then it affects all of your units. So that was awesome with, I was running the Arcanaut company with the big guns and that sort of stuff. So those are examples of units that you can just plug into any army, any mixed army, and they're going to add some value. And then the next thing that I start to look at is, well, what are your sort of power pairs? So sometimes the power pair is like a concept is just like two things that augment each other. So sometimes that'll be like I take a what's the dude called, a Ruin Smiter, and then 30 Volkite Berserkers. So that the reason that gives me my army utility is because they're off the board. The Volkites take up one of the mandatory 3 battle line units that I need to take, and then when they come up, they're 60 wounds that have a 4-up armor save, so long as they haven't charged. If they charge, they're shooting at mortals as well. So looking at like what are the power pairs you want to bring into your army, and if you think about having like 3 or 4 axes of power, then your army actually it's got a fair bit of utility and strength in it. For me, I typically probably try and get two really strong power pairs in the army, and then the rest of the army is just chaff off the board.
Yeah, that
and
makes
then the other sort of.
No, sorry. No, you carry on. No, I was just going to say that makes. Yeah, I can completely understand that. Sometimes when you look at an army list, one of the processes I've had to develop, and I don't know if this is an interesting thing that I've talked to you about before, but one of often when I'm doing the live coverage, I have to look at an army list. And obviously, like doing daily shows or weekly shows or whatever, and being intimately involved in the gaming system does help me with this process a lot. But you do have to. I go through this process of just of identifying units in a list now, and I kind of like shorthand. I've got a couple of phrases. So bully, Marathi is obviously a good example of a bully. Yeah. Utility piece would be the spell that you really want to happen, but it doesn't have to happen. Like, and I kind of like I start to just keyword those in my head for myself as I start doing coverage. But then because of that, like as I start cycling through lists and looking at lists, I start to identify how not only some lists have, like you've said, they have a power pair, or they have like a couple of pairings, in which case you've got these strong blocks. Like if we think about what Benjamin was talking about yesterday with his build, he obviously had this big bravery debuff army with 6 flayers doing tons of mortal wounds, but then Archeon piling and attacking twice was another element of that. So he had at least 2 major threats in his army. And then there's everything else around that. So yeah, I've always started to break that down for myself for doing coverage, which I'm sure as a list builder, and I'm one too, obviously. But like as a list builder, that's one of the processes that often people go through. I want to put this threat in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the nice benefits of playing something that's a bit off meta is that the power isn't necessarily obvious straight away to your opponent. So that's one of the cool things. Like if you came up against a change host that had a heap of flamers, you would straight away you'd be going, shit, yeah, those flamers are going to hurt me if I don't screen or if I don't whatever. Whereas if you're playing something that's a bit off meta, and I think this was one of the dudes from down here, Dalton, played a really cool Big War list at CanCon, and it was just layered. It was just absolutely layered with all of these buffs and debuffs, and there was so much utility there. And you don't see it on paper, but then as soon as he puts it on the table and starts moving the Rogue Idol 60 inches or getting the Savage Orcs up to a 2+ saving cover, rerolling ones, you're like, what the fuck? What am I supposed to do with that? Just what he did to me. Turn 1, Savage Orcs, he had 30 of them, 2+ save, reroll ones. I was like, okay, I can't move that. Like,
yeah, that's 60 wounds.
But that's
bonkers.
Like, it's not readily apparent when you look at the list, and I think that's one of the inherent strengths of running a mixed a GA army, is that you're sort of taking stuff that people aren't used to. Even here, I ran the 12 pterodons dropping 3 inches away. And I would explain to everyone what they did, and because it wasn't a common build over here, people just had no idea what the damage output was. It's insane, because they were doing mortals in the movement phase, shooting. They had really effective shooting, and then in combat they're actually completely fine if they're cleaning up the scraps. You wouldn't throw them in against another combat unit, but they were able to do a heap of work. And I think on paper, people saw like, well, that's 36 wounds with a 5-up save for then 480 points. But what it did was it gave me so much control in all these other aspects of the game. And then the other thing, sort of from a principles perspective, so we talked about like, what are the things that work on their own, what needs support. I think the other thing is you need to start like really you have to be really clean. Like it's they're typically unforgiving armies, because they won't have things like the Hagnar after save or the +1 armor save to the whole army, like the what are they called, OBR or any of that sort of stuff. They can't fight on a 10-inch charge. They don't have those extra strengths. So it just means you have to be super careful with your sequencing and with probably I would say your target selection as much as anything else as well.
Yeah. So just to refresh some key principles there. Make sure you've got your going solo units, your power pairs, and your sequencing and your procking. Those are the principles of playing GA.
Well, they're just they're to an extent. I think there's the other thing is what you're losing. So you're losing really allegiance abilities, and what you're gaining is versatility, because you can adapt to no matter what the meta is. There's literally hundreds of war scrolls in each of the GAs. I think on balance, probably GA Chaos is the best because of the way you can skew lists. So you could take, like, for instance, I think you could take a change host and then add Jezzails. I'm pretty sure that would work from a points perspective. There's a heap of stuff you can do.
Yeah, I also think one of the things that I think also Chaos, thanks to the past 2 releases, Slaves of Darkness and Wrath of the Everchosen, doesn't overly need putting into a Grand Alliance as much as maybe Order.
Oh no, not at all. But
not that either need them, but there's still some really fun stuff. Like for me, this never gets talked about really. One of the best wizards in the game, although wizards are getting cheaper and so it's a little bit tough. But the Demon Smith for Chaos Dwarves is just phenomenal. He does.
Oh yeah, the range of that spell is nuts.
36-inch, 36-inch can't run -1 to hit spell, so that's solid. Has a little shooting attack, which people really don't take into account, which is D3 mortal wounds on a 2-up every time. I mean, that's just good. That's like the price of an endless spell anyway. I mean, it's short range, but it's fine. He's okay in combat. He's decent save, but then also if he ever takes any damage at all, just 1, he gets an instant +1 to dispel. So, but in a Chaos army or in any army where you're doing minuses to hit with Geminids and other stuff, it's just a great little inclusion. But it's almost impossible because you can't ally in Chaos Dwarfs into any other army. So you have to go in mixed Chaos to start being able to apply that unit inside, and it's just really good. Yeah.
Yeah, love it. So for me, I think, Chaos is probably the strongest and Death is probably the weakest. So on that basis, I've got a mixed Death army being commissioned up at the moment.
Do you want to tell us about it?
I'm very excited to talk about. So we might do some specific examples if that's all right.
I'd love to.
Awesome. So this first list I want to talk about is the one that I've been running recently. And basically, I'll run you top to bottom. I won't take too long, I promise.
That's okay. Take as long as you like. Most of us are here for the duration. Also, with all these lists, I'm going to put them on the Wargamer website, and I'll include them in the show notes below.
Awesome. So I'm going to start this list off. When building a GA list, what realm do you think we're going to be from, Rob?
I'm almost certain we're going to be from the realm of light.
Yes, how did you guess? So we start off with the general. He is an abhorrent Ghoul King on Royal Terrorgeist. So what we're talking about before, this guy has innate abilities within his war scroll. That's the 6 mortal wounds, procking on the 6 for the Terrorgeist. It's the 5-up after damage save spell, which is amazing. It's the heals that happen innately, and also he explodes. So if you throw him into a clustered area, he can actually do quite a bit of damage as he dies. He's got the command trait Red Fury and the artifact Cloak of Mist and Shadow. So this combo is, after he fights, roll a dice. On a 5+, he immediately fights again. So it's nowhere near as good as the Flesh Eater Court's ability, which is paying a command point, so using a resource to do it. But equally, a third of the time he just gets to fight a second time, which, given his damage profile, is amazing. And then he has the best artifact in all of Age of Sigmar. And I challenge any of your listeners or anyone to find a better artifact than this. It's the Cloak of Mist and Shadow. So do you know what that does?
I do, but let's tell everyone what it does.
All right. At the start of the combat phase, he can teleport 12 inches. Now, that's super important for a number of reasons. The first being, it's not a wholly within. So he's on a massive, like a 4.5-inch base. Effectively, he can move 17 inches because only 1 millimeter or less, 1/1000th of a millimeter needs to be within 12 inches of where he lands. So it means the very back of his base could be 11.9999999 inches away from the front, which gives you enormous board control. And it happens at the start of the combat phase. So what that means is on turns where he's not in combat, you can do it. So if your opponent goes first, you could just move him up 17 inches. If you've charged that turn, you could teleport away, sit outside of 3, and then because you've made a charge, you could subsequently pile in. So it enables you to do some of that activation war shenanigans. It enables when somebody charges you, not very many things can kill a Terrorgeist outright, but if somebody charges you with something that you can just teleport away and they won't be able to fight you because you sit outside of whatever their pile in range is. And it means you can work around things like the Locust. So you could charge a Keeper. They would Locust you at the end of the charge phase. You would then teleport and just be outside of 3. It would get to the end of your combat phase and he would just pile in because he's charged that turn. And the Keeper won't have been able to strike him. So from my perspective, it is the best artifact in the game. It's nuts.
It is genuinely nuts. Like we saw, obviously, Randy use it at CanCon, and previously been used.
Not a good illustration of its power.
No. We saw it used. We didn't see it used overly well. But yeah, and it's one of those things because it's inside Grand Alliance Army. It's almost too powerful. Like if you talked about it in any other army, you're like, whoa, that.
Oh yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, that is good. But his command trait is also rad.
Yeah, exactly. It's the best of a bad lot, right? And it's just like if it happens, and when we get to the end of this list, we'll talk about procking because we've talked about on the 6 he does the mortal wounds from the maw of the Terrorgeist. On a 5+ he fights again. Go down later in the list, we've got Kurdos who steals a command point on a 5+. We've got Hex Wraiths who pop mortal wounds on a 6. What we're doing is that these are like all things that are going off on 6s or 5s. They're unlikely to happen. So what we're doing is we're increasing the number of times we're rolling those dice to increase the probability of it actually working and being effective. So next thing in the list supports that, and it's the Vampire Lord. He's there for his command ability, which is +1 attack on friendly death units. So that's one of the things when we're talking Grand Alliance. What you want is generic language. So this guy affects friendly death, meaning he can affect the Terrorgeist, and later on you can affect the Hex Wraiths, and that's really important. He also is a single cast wizard, so sometimes you want to get that mystic shield off or do a cheeky mortal wound. He's really good for that. And in Grand Alliance Death, he gives a 6-up after save to stuff that's within 6 inches of him, so it's nice to have a few characters. The next guy on the list, I don't know, what do you think of Kurdos, Rob? What's your evaluation of Kurdos, the Craven King?
Yeah, so I think it's decent. Having had my command points stolen from... I've played more Catacrosses than I've played Kurdos, but the same idea that I'll lose my command points from him is just solid as. Because, truthfully, You can just deprive people of the ability to make their army go. And some people don't really think about their resource management for the army. So I think he's really good. And I did talk about it on when we very ever did the Nighthaunt review all the way back in the day. It's decent, really, really good. And he's got an unrendable save. So actually, it's not the
Yeah,
worst.
exactly.
That's not the worst thing you could have, right?
So he's 180 points for a 7 wound character, which like typically that's pretty expensive as a price point. But as you said, he's got the unrendable save, and then on a 5+ each turn, he's stealing a command point. So at first, when I was thinking about that, I thought, oh, that's giving you 50 points of value. So therefore, he's really 130 points. You can steal one over the game. Then I played against Catacross, and I lost a command point. This was using my order, and I was like, fuck, I needed that command point. That's really critical. And then that made me realize actually Kurdos is getting you 100 points of value every time he steals a command point, because he's depriving them of 50 and he's gaining you 50. So therefore, when I'm trying to like evaluate him, I reckon he's an 80-point character, so long as he can steal one command point during the game. And then as an 80-point character, he's got 7 wounds, a 4-up save that can't be rendered. His attack profile is 5 attacks, rend 2, damage D3, and then an extra cheeky 6 attacks from the Spectral Claws, which do mortal wounds. Like, he's actually a beat stick with that attack profile. That's like, there are very few infantry characters that are punching out that much damage. And then he's got some bonuses for if he's fighting against other characters. And if he's another guy that procs, so his damage jumps up to D6 if he's rolling 6s to hit. So I reckon Kurdos is a baller. I think he's massively underutilized in Nighthaunt and Death Armies in general. So he's a dude I'm excited to play with. And then the final character in the army is the Dreadblade Harrow. So this bloke is 90 points. He's got the Aether Quartz brooch. He can do heaps of sneaky shit with teleports. I love teleports. And I'd probably take him even if he wasn't part of the battalion that I've used in this list. Then following that, the standard battle line in these lists is often 3x5 direwolves. Potentially, if you move the points around, you might look at adding like a unit of Chain Rasport or something there, but unfortunately, I don't think I can squeeze them in this time. And then 2 units of 10 Hex Raids, a Black Coach, and the Death Riders Battalion. So, do you know about the Death Riders Battalion?
I do, yes, but you could tell people what it does. Yeah.
So Death Riders gives you the ability from the Nighthaunt book. So what it does is it replaces that ability, and it gives you this other ability that it procs on a 9.
Oh, so it's like, yeah, because that's so clever that having the battalion inside Mixed Death, because it still gives you the ability. Oh, it doesn't doesn't add +1 to the roll. It gives you a new version of the ability. That's really clever.
And it's really clear in the language as well that it works outside. So 2 units of 10 Hex Wraiths then, which can fight if they hit a 9 to charge. The Black Coach, which is just a massive distraction piece. Like, it's 220 points. Once it gets to the first level, so each turn you roll 3 dice, each 4+, it goes up a level. Once you get to the first level, it's bringing back D3 Hex Wraiths a turn, which is really important because it's models, not wounds. And then the Vampire Lord can do some returning models as well. And then those guys, they actually pump out a heap of damage. So typically 10 Hex Wraiths is 21 attacks. But you chuck the Vampire Lord in there and you're up to 31 attacks. And then because you're Death Riders, if you rolled a 9 or more to charge, you're up to 62 attacks.
Wow.
So 62 attacks, 6s to hit immortals. You're going to do 10 mortals. You're going to do 20 other hits. What are you going to do? 14 wounds at Rem 1, and then a heap of wounds from your horses as well. So they actually have quite a bit of combat output, and they've got a ethereal 4+ save. So they're awesome.
Yeah, they're really scary. Yeah.
So the premise of the list is the Terrorgeist can go around doing stuff out of sequence and teleporting around. The Hex Wraiths can hit those 9-inch charges and be fighting out of sequence. The Black Coach can do that as well. Even the Dreadblade Harrow, you can teleport him, right?
Yeah.
He's 9 away. if he hits a 9 for his charge, he gets to go in and fight, and then he fights again in the combat phase. So he's actually really good at taking out support characters or little shitty units that are going to be annoying and sit on objectives.
Yeah,
so,
those little 10-man units at the back of the board, always on that little disc, sitting there ready to score.
That's exactly
points.
what it is.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. Those guys getting the gold. So, yeah, that's the list I've been playing. I love it. It's really strong, and it seems shit on paper. So it's like ticking all the boxes for me.
Yeah, it's genuinely really good. Oh, Hex races also fly, right?
Yeah, Hex race fly.
Yeah,
so
which is underappreciated, I think.
Underrated, man. And we're going to get into that in the next list. I think fly is like low key one of the best rules. Retreat and charge and fly. They were the two rules that I'm like, where can I squeeze these into my armies? Yeah. Now let's just say hypothetically the event is doing what some of the events over here are doing, and they say you can't take artifacts from the realm. If that were the case, we'd have to drop the Aether Quartz brooch, and then there's another item in death, and what it allows you to do is summon. It's to bring on a unit of summonable models, and it's 2d6 wounds worth of models. So when they wrote this, the units that you could summon were zombies and skeletons.
Right.
But
that's increased now.
Now it's Mimorn Banshees. So you get 2d6 Mimorn Banshees for free.
Wow.
Well, it's all sorts of Night Haunt, which is summonable death, right? So you get 2d6 Mimorn Banshees. So let's say ordinarily that's going to be 12. Every time you roll 2d6, it's going to be 12. You get 12 Mimorn Banshees for free.
Every time.
They're set up. Yeah, every time. They're set up within 12 of the person with the artifact, and then they can move. So they only need to be outside of 3. They've got an 8-inch move. So they're 20 inches plus their 2d6 charge from wherever you're starting. But equally, if you hold on to it for later in the game, you could just set them up 3 inches away from what you want them to fight. And because it's summonable death, if you were to roll particularly high, you might even think about bringing something like some additional hex rates on, because hex rates do mortal wounds in the movement phase, so that they can move over things, and on a 5-up they do mortal wounds to the units they move over. That can be super useful.
Yeah.
And I guess that was one of the things you were talking about on your show. We talked about the blood crushers, right?
Yeah.
The hex rates in the movement phase do mortal wounds, in the charge phase do mortal wounds, and in the combat phase do mortal wounds. So they're able to distribute their damage across 3 phases. That's super, super helpful because it lets you clear chaff lines. It lets you have a better understanding of how many models you need where to claim objectives, because you're killing stuff earlier than the end of the turn. And yeah, I love them. I reckon they're awesome. I've got 30 painted up by Danny, and they look so, so, so good. I can't wait till the tournaments get going again and I can get them out on the table properly.
No, yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I mean, when I wrote a Death Riders list like when the Night Haunt book came out, unfortunately, and I had like the plus 3 inches move, which you can find inside Night Haunt, which is another way of I think it's called some sort of feather. I think it was.
It's called Pendant of the Fell Wind.
There we go.
And it's like the first thing you choose when you're writing a Night Haunt list.
100% every time, right?
And there's one called Ruler of the Spirit Host, which bring back the 3 models. Those are the 2 things. Like, you're writing your Night Haunt list, and that's the equivalent to the zombie dragon with ethereal amulet. It just is auto-populated.
Yeah. It just pops up straight in your list. You didn't even write it in; it's just there. Like, thanks for that. Yeah, but that's really good. But the fact that it allows you to have also the other threat, like we talked about before, the other threat of the Ghoul King, and then he's able to make use of that just terrifying Cloak of Mist and Shadows. Really fun, and also would look awesome, cool. Some direwolves as well. It would be a really awesome looking army, and it's almost a cavalry army, right? Yeah, everything.
That was the idea. It started as a cavalry army, and then Kurdos snuck his way in. So
I mean, he's on a chair, isn't he?
I don't know. Yeah, he's on a chair. He's mounted. That's right.
It counts.
The Terrorgeist, I just posted him up on Twitter yesterday. So if people want to track down at Araby Rises, I posted a picture of him. It's a Carmine Dragon's body within the Terrorgeist wings and Terrorgeist head. It looks amazing.
Yeah, there we go. I put the link in the chat, and I'll also include it in the show notes as well, so you can go and follow. Before we get on to the next list, just really quickly, that's not your only Twitter account, though. Araby Rises.
It's my only one. Sadly, there are some sycophants out there. You know what it's like, Rob, when you've got the fandom. So there are some people that are.
I don't have a
There
fandom.
are some people
I
that
just
are
got
a
a
bit
load of
obsessive.
mates.
You got some mate. You got some enemies as well, which is that takes some doing. So well done. That's great.
I do. No way.
Just I think they call themselves the faithful. So
Hashtag. Yeah, they might do. But I'm an atheist, so that makes loads of sense. All right,
oh,
so
mate.
the next list. Should we talk about the next one?
Jump on to the next one. All right, so this one here I'm 280 points short. So this one here I've got an idea, but I haven't got it on the table yet. So I'm still sort of playing around with what it looks like. But I'll talk you through top to bottom, and then maybe we can try and figure out what the last 280 points looks like.
Okay.
So we start off. We've got Neferata as the general. She's obviously a named character, so I don't get any Red Fury or anything like that this time, but that's fine. She is an amazing character because of all of those innate abilities on her scroll. So her dagger, if she wounds you and doesn't kill you, she rolls a dice. If she hits a 6, she kills you. So she can one shot Archaon, she can one shot Marathi. She can't even scratch Gotrek. She can one shot a Star Drake. She's a baller. Her command ability is a massive aura effect, -1 to hit. And in their infinite wisdom, Games Workshop allow you to stack that. So that's great.
Bonus.
Next up, I've got and then of course, remiss not to add, she can cast an ethereal spell. And like we'll talk about with the previous list, this ethereal spell also gives you fly, and fly is an amazing rule.
Yeah.
Her obvious deficiency is that she has 11 wounds and a 4-up save. So let's remember that, because we'll come back to it later. Next up, I've got a Mortizan Bone Shaper. So this guy is just to bring back 3 more Tech Guard a turn, and maybe even to cast the reroll ones for Armor Save Mystic Shield on the Mortec Guard, just so they're a bit more survivable in phases outside of the combat phase.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, I've got the Vampire Lord again. And again, he's there for the +1 attack, which on 40 Mortec Guard is amazing. And he's just he'll carry an artifact as well, because this list also has a battalion. So in terms of battle line, we've got 40 Mortec Guard, 2 units of 5 Direwolves. And then the Mortec Guard being the obvious target for Neferata's ethereal and fly spell. So if you get fly on those guys and you're able to plonk them up, you use a 6 to run 11 inches in the first turn, and you've just got 40 ethereal Mortec Guard in the middle of the board, there's very few things that are going to be able to work their way through that. Next, I've got a Corpse Card. Corpse Card is so good. It's 80 points. It gives you +1 to cast in a big bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And what it also does is it gives +1 armor save to your Direwolves. So your Direwolves go from a 5 up to a 4 up. And then 5 of them have such a small footprint, it's super easy to get them in terrain. So you can get them sitting near those objectives on a 3-up save, or you can use them in their typical role as a screener. So I think the Corpse Card is underused, but it's often hard to get the points right in there.
Yeah, and I've also thought about I've written a couple of lists before where it's just been a bunch of Direwolves and some Corpse Cards, because that +1 save.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah, that works. That's genuinely a thing.
That works. That the sort of 80 Direwolves and 3 Corpse Cards is something that I've been playing around with as well, but that's probably a conversation for another time.
Good.
And then finally, to round out the list, I've got 2 units of 5 Hex Raids, and they're in a battalion called the Dolores Guard. Do you know about the Dolores Guard?
I'm not claiming that one. Do not.
Okay. So the Dolores Guard is a battalion that came out in the White Dwarf and was subsequently pointed, and through the FAQ was brought into matched play. So the Dolores Guard is 2 to 4 units of Hex Raids. Add 1 to their attacks if they've charged in the turn. So that gets them 5 of them up to 16 attacks on the charge, or 21 attacks if you've used the command ability from your Vampire, which 21 attacks from 5 models that have both rend and the capacity for mortal wounds is great damage output for frontage. That's really good. Clip on the edge of the unit, you can actually do some serious hurt with them. but then importantly, it has a second ability. If a unit from the Dolores Guard is within 3 of your general, remembering that my general was Neffy,
Yeah.
on a 2+, every time she suffers a wound, it's allocated to them instead. So every time she's allocated a wound, mortal or otherwise, it goes on to my Hex Wraiths, who have a 4+ ethereal save and have multiple ways of being healed and brought back, including by Neferata.
Wow.
So ostensibly, it makes her unkillable.
Yeah, it's like a 20 wound,
awesome.
a 20 wound buff before you even get towards Neffy. Yeah, that's amazing.
Because that's her only deficiency, as far as I can see, is that she's easy to kill. Because
Yes.
the spells cast on a 6, you're getting +1 to cast. Maybe with the unbind and dispel bonuses out there, that getting the spell off is a tricky thing. But the debuff to hit is an ability, so they can't stop that. You're getting, it's 120 points for the Dolores Guard, right? You could take 4 units of 5 Hex Wraiths in that battalion, have great chaff that absorb wounds for your hero, and give you an extra command point and give you an artifact. I reckon it's a steal.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Also, I'm learning, Stephen AOS, big shout. I hope you're well over in Ireland, Northern Ireland, sorry. Yeah, but can you use your shield wall for a CP in Grand Alliance Death? I didn't think you could.
Yes, you can.
But you can.
Yeah, you can. So in combat, they're on 4+ ethereal, re-rolling save. So basically the math on that is that if you're at Rem 1, they're exactly the same as the ones in the book with the +1 Petrifex. If you're there at Rem 2 or greater, it's better to have them in this layout. But I think like 40 of them is just not going anywhere. I honestly think you could drop that to a unit of 20 and it would still be just as terrifying.
Yes, I mean the good thing about the Mortek Guard is also the output as well. Like they're decent in a scrap. Yeah. So like, it's what you would replace them with doing that job of fighting. But also they're also minus to hit. They're also minus to hit in this version as well, though.
Well, that's right, and we've got 280 points up our sleeve. So 280 points, incidentally, is enough for a Morgul, who also has a -1 to hit bubble, is also an ethereal monster. 280 points is enough for a Liege Cavalos and the Geminids, just because who doesn't want more minuses to hit and more attacks from the Mortek Guard? 280 points is enough for, how many would it be? 20 Direwolves, if we just want to spam them as well. It's enough for 10 more Hex Wraiths. There's a heap of things we could add to round out this list. But I guess I was interested in, what do you think? Do we double down on the debuffs, or it feels light on bodies. That's my sort of concern, I guess, at the moment.
That's what I'd say. I'd either want a way to, because as I picture it in my head, Neffy and the Hex Rays sit behind the Mortek. The Mortek push forward, but that's not enough bodies to hold all of the objectives. So I'd want something fast that can go in, like either something that can teleport or go at the back, or something that can punch and drill a hole through on a flank or the side. Or does that make sense?
The other thing you could do is you could drop some Mortek, and then you could take that same Terrorgeist from the previous list, and you could make him ethereal, and you could make him negatives to hit as well if you wanted.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's absolutely, yeah. You could drop some Mortek and put the monster in. It's terrifying.
I sort of think like this one probably requires some finesse still. You know what I mean? This is very much a draft list, but I just thought, as an idea, that's the basic bare bones that you get, and then it's like, how do you build on that? And I haven't chucked the artifacts on this one either, so you'd have to work through what artifacts you want. There's an amazing artifact in the Realm of Shadow, which is just reroll ones for armor saves in the combat phase, and I often use that with my Fire Slayers because they've got really good armor to begin with, and just being able to give them reroll ones for armor saves without using a command point really helpful. So that potentially would save you command points with the Mortek. But yeah, there's the beginning of a list here. I've just got to work out how to finish it off.
I really like the introduction to the Dolores Guard. That's really, really fun. And then, I did not. Interesting that you can use the CPs to replace Relentless Discipline points for OCRs. I had not known that. So that's
it's just a command ability. So the Relentless Discipline is described in the Army book rules and then the War Scrolls all stand alone. So the War Scroll just talks about it as a command ability, and then it was clarified through FAQ. I think I'll have to go back and read, but I remember at the time them saying, "Hang on a tick, what if you take these outside of that book?" The problem is that both the battalions, so the Cavalos Death Lance, whatever it's called, and the Mortec Guard Battalion, they both say you can use the ability without spending a relentless discipline. So my interpretation of that would be that you wouldn't be able to use the ability for free in the battalion. Otherwise, that battalion would be worth looking at as well.
Oh, that's super interesting. I like that a lot. I also like just the hex race again. Their inclusion. I've been trying to find a way to use those hex race, and also the hex race are cool because they're able to fly over your own screen of Mortec in that situation, right? Yeah, which is decent.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
I think probably you probably want at least, because because you've got 280 points, 10 of them cost 280. You could get a unit of 10 in addition to the 2 units of 5, and the 10 with buffs is really good in a fight. The problem is, in the absence of buffs, they're pretty shit. So you need to have some support pieces around them.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, they and like we've said, that movement damage that they can do can happen in every turn, which is could be over time plenty. It's just really fun. I also like Nephi being in there as well because you're just going to be able to kill stuff, which is just not.
She's actually really good in combat, but people are too scared to put her there. So her damage profiles are really good. I fought against an Archon recently, and I was just like, what the hell? He was really good at clearing out chaff. So I think she'd be able to do that as well. And she can obviously fly, and she's really fast.
Yeah, just amazing. By the way, hello to everyone who's just joined us. Galgoth, Chudred. Great. 2 great lists. Honestly, my brain's whirring. I'm interested to see what everyone in the Twitch chat is thinking of those lists. They're really fun. But just gives you some examples of stuff that's overlooked when you start playing inside a single allegiance, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, some of this stuff is super fringe, but who cares? That's the whole point, right?
Well, I think also one of the things that we're all going to want to do over the next preceding months is to make some wacky lists in our head, or have an excuse to paint up our hex wraiths, which previously I don't think many of us really had many excuses to. But the Death Riders or a Black Coach, which is a phenomenal model.
Oh man, and so I just did like basic bitch commission level. That was what I asked for from Danny, and he didn't follow the brief because they've come back and they're so nice. And I look at the Black Coach, and he's done non-metallic metal on all of the ornate. I don't know what you call the stuff that the vampires in or whatever, but it's just like all this amazing detailed metal work, and it's all non-metallic metal. It looks so good. I'm so happy with it.
Yeah. All right, good. Well, I want to see some pictures. And if Danny Plays is doing it, it's going to be arguably way too good. The only fear that you have is that if he's painting it, he'll then play you, and Danny Plays is one of comfortably one of the best players in his house, at least. Maybe even in his local area. So
possible. I think he's the only player in Essendon, so he's got the #1 ranking. That's great.
All right. Well, these are great. Have you got any other tips for people looking to make Grand Alliance armies in other factions or in other Grand Alliances?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've done lists for all of them, but they're probably, I'm doing, I'm painting at the moment a mixed destruction army, and mixed destruction is really, really, really cool because it has ways that you can double down on debuffs. So there's like about half a dozen ways you can get minuses to hit across destruction, or you can do stuff where you unlock the Iron Fist, unlocks the ability to move and charge and fight in the hero phase. So that opens up a heap of things. And then the Gloomspite, I think the strength of the Gloomspite book is the endless spells, and they're really cheap and really easy to cast, so you don't lose anything. Do you know what I mean? If you take Scragrot, the Cauldron, and the Spider spell, which is insane, you've spent about 300 points, and you've got a machine gun that can do a heap of different things.
Yeah, and you put that in with other elements that you need, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, I think probably the destruction warrants its own conversation. I'm hesitant.
Yeah, no, I think
I'm hesitant to disclose my tech, Rob. You know what I mean? I want to pick that up. to talk through it.
The worst people. No, yeah, we should 100%. I don't know if anyone else is excited, but I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I would love you to have to just do a different, maybe a Grand Alliance a week over the next 4 weeks if you're up for it.
Well, dude, we're gonna have a lot of time on our hands. I think that can work.
Oh,
That's not a problem.
that's great. Okay, well then, fabulous, because we've about hit where we've been putting these shows around the hour mark. So
Cool.
that'll be fun. But I'd like to get your
Mhm.
thoughts, because we've had a pretty momentous day today
Mhm.
in Games Workshop announcing. Obviously, they've closed their factories and also all distribution. So I think there's an announcement coming later about what might happen with releases and other stuff. So I was wondering, like, what your take on is, it if you've had a take, and just generally just a quick chat about it for everyone, because it's a pretty major
Yeah,
piece
yeah.
of news for the hobby.
I mean, I'll put my cards on the table. I'm a union man, and I believe in the power of people to collectively bargain. And I think corporations shouldn't be assholes. That's my starting position, right?
Same.
So that just gives people context. I think it's fabulous that they're putting the health and safety of their workers first. I hope they're also supporting people's mental health at this time, and I hope they're also working out some sort of fiscal model where people aren't going to fucking go broke. And do you know what I mean? Like it's a really difficult balancing act, but they've absolutely, from my perspective, absolutely made the right call. Not exposing. Why would you, if the rules are that you can't be, we're 1 per 4 square meters or something here. If you can't work like that in a warehouse, right? You can't work like that in retail. Got to put your health first, man. I think it's awesome, and I'm so glad that they did it and they did it quickly.
Same, same. I'll bash it when I think they do something wrong, and I'll praise them when I think they're doing something
Yep.
right. And I think it's absolutely the right decision. I want the company to prosper, because I genuinely love the game. So it's never like, but
Mhm.
more importantly, I want the
Mhm.
people inside just like you, the people inside the company to prosper, stay safe, and stay well. So I think it's an
Yep. Stay
excellent.
hydrated.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an excellent decision. Stay hydrated and stay super well. So, like, yeah, I'm really hoping that they get the back of, because there would be nothing worse if they didn't get the back of all their workers as well. And I'm really
Yeah.
hoping they do that, because I really want to invest in a game where I feel like the company cares about folk. So that would be a really nice thing. But I think this is a clear indication, whether or not mandated by the government or whatever. I think it's cool. I think it's
Yeah.
great, and I think it's a huge positive. And I think all of us have got armies that we could be working on in the meantime. Books we haven't read, a whole host of things. So I think it's really good, right?
Yeah, that future release schedule that hadn't dawned on me until you mentioned it. That will be really interesting. We live in a world where I think it would be completely cool for them to release stuff digitally. But I wonder what the relationship is between like release weekend and sales, because I know a lot of people, they see the models for the first time and they impulse buy.
Mm.
And I hope it doesn't mean that there's a delay in the future stuff coming up, because I'm really excited about the Gargants and the Lumineth and those guys. But at the end of the day, I reckon they've made a good call here.
Yeah, I think that there's actually a lot that they bank on. The book release and then the models happening at the same time, and that's where you get the spike in
Mhm.
sales. So,
Oh,
like,
I'm an idiot. Every time they release one of those boxes, I just trot into my local game store and I buy it. And then, like about 40 minutes later, I'm like, well, what am I going to do with this? Why do I get this?
but the
What's
whole
wrong
way
with
in,
you?
you're like, I'm making 2 armies. There's going to be a theme. I've got
Yeah,
like a story happening in my head. Yeah, I think and so you're looking at like a huge, obviously also not being able to ship out. A huge part of what they do is trade. So they send a whole bunch out to
yeah,
local gaming stores, which is a bit sad. So
yeah.
they won't be doing that as well. So make sure you do support the people. But at the end of the day, they're a big multinational corporation with a lot of money, so they can make their own way. People who don't have as much money are going to be your local gaming
Mhm.
stores and your local gaming centers. So if you've got an opportunity to buy a gift card or to buy some other models, whatever that might be,
Mhm.
or some other paint or something, I think a great use of your money, if you end up being like, wow, I've got 300 quid more a month than I ever expected. What do I normally spend
Mhm.
this on? Normally it would be your impulse purchases. It might be good to support those guys. I think that would be good.
Yeah,
If
100%.
Yeah, if they can, and if you can.
And
But
can we extend that to local cafes, restaurants, and bars that are doing takeaway and
of course,
delivery, which we've still got firing over here?
and
Because
it's also a good.
those
Go on.
those businesses run on such small margins, man, and the people that work there, they're passionate about food or they're passionate about hospitality, that's this take the arse out of that industry if we're not careful.
No, I agreed. Also, some really cool things I've seen is positive news. So I get all my fresh produce delivered from a farm. I always have.
Of course you do.
Don't be like that. But there are
No,
services.
lucky.
There are services like that in a lot of places, right, where you're able to do something
Yeah.
similar. So
Yep.
like. And big multinational supermarkets have never been particularly good for the environment and or people. They normally pay people shit, and they also normally like put the people on the other end where they're buying it from shit. So like it might be a good time to like reevaluate where you purchase things from generally. Trying to teach people to suck eggs, but a really positive thing might be that those local producers are still actually able to bring you local produce, which is good and is a huge positive. Similarly, I've also seen that local breweries. I don't know if you guys have had that. But in London and around the UK, like gin breweries and stuff have started making their own hand sanitizers. Have you seen
Yeah,
this?
how awesome is that? That's great. I love it.
Yeah, I was like, but they're still coming in the very hipster bottles, and I'm like, this is perfect. This is exactly what hand sanitizer
It's
for the
like, oh,
man.
my hand sanitizer's from a distillery.
Yeah, that's exactly where you want it to be from. All right. So it's been wonderful having you on the show. Thank you so much. It's been a fascinating listen, and I've just been enthralled. So thank you very much. And if you want to go and talk to Sam or tweet him at Araby Rises, go find him. I'm sure you'll find someone who's up for a talk about anything at any point, which is good.
Oh, mate, absolutely. Yeah, I love talking Warhammer. Just firstly, thank you very much for having me on. I've also enjoyed it. It's great to have a chat to you anytime, but on the air is always fun. I want to give a shout out to someone that went 5-1 at CanCon.
Please do.
That dominated the top tables.
Please do.
And as I understand, you might have fresh aired this guy. So we've got to pay our dues when someone is a big dog on the top table. So my mate Hayden Bryce, best IDNF player in Australia, and is coming up with some secret tech for Sylvaneth. So you might need to have a chat to Hayden at some stage about how to make Sylvaneth work.
I would be honoured, and I'm sorry if I haven't. Right? So.
I think you made the executive choice not to put Eels on the streams. He was on the top 5 tables the whole weekend, and it's like, oh, that list is quite literally the same as every other IDNF list I've ever seen.
Yeah, like at a certain point, none of the audience need to ever see that, right?
Yeah.
All right, Hayden Bryce, we're going to get him on the show and talk Sylvaneth. I would like to do the Sylvaneth round table. That would make me laugh loads. I'll just sit there just being like, you're all wrong, but I'm willing to listen. A pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone.
Cheers, bud.
Thank you. You're a legend. Thank you to everyone who's been listening. You guys are great. Join us again tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll be talking with Diffie, again another Aussie on the show. We're going to be talking to Diffie about the Down Under pairings and what it's like organising a pairing app for tournaments and how complicated that is, things that go into it. So that'll be a really fun look behind the curtain of some of those elements, which will be good. So that'll be midday tomorrow, as always. Thank you to everyone who's listened. If you are obviously on the podcast, stay hydrated. And Sam, thanks so much again. You are great. Hope you all have a great day. Any final thoughts?
No, farewell. Don't fail your strength test.